Welcome to the class looking at the contract review functionality. Contract review has been added because what it does is it adds a check step in creating a batch of samples. So on the screen here we have a batch of samples. The idea is that if your customer submits you a bunch of samples that need testing doing on them, you can create your record in Qualoupe like this one. And the contract review functionality, if it's enabled, means that before you can proceed with testing the samples, somebody with contract review authority, in other words an administrator, has to check over the samples and just make sure that the testing that's been put on the sample matches what's been ordered up by the client, or possibly just do a check to make sure that your contract with your client is still valid, i.e. they don't owe you money or something like that. And when they've performed the contract review stage, this is recorded in the system so you can see who reviewed the batch and when it was done. So what I'll do is I'll show you how this is set up first and then I'll demonstrate it. So if I go to the home page, there's two places this needs to be set up. And the first place is you need to turn it on globally for the whole system. So we'll go to the Administrator tab, Application Manager, and well, that loads. And if we go to the Batch Manager, because the contract review functionality relates to batches of samples, in the application settings we see we have a line here, Contract Review. This is currently set to true. The default condition of this in a new Qualoupe system is false. So to set something to true, you just double click on it and you've got to tick for true, uncheck for not true. So I shall leave that as it is because it's turned on. So that's in the Application Manager, the settings for the Batch Manager. So I'll go out of here. So that turns it on for the system, and then in the Roles Manager you have to allocate the contract review privilege to certain users. So I'm logged on as administrator, so here we are, admin. I'll go to Application Permissions, Batch Manager, and you can see I've previously given myself contract review permission. So obviously if you had somebody who was creating the batch and putting the samples on it, you need a second person who's got contract review to check, to come in and just check over the work. So that would be like the lab manager or an administrator of some sort. So we've set it up in Applications Manager. We've assigned the roles to admin. Conveniently, I'm logged in as admin. So if I go to the Batch Manager, I shall create a new batch. So we'll go New Record, and I'll choose a customer. Let's have that one. And I'll choose a material, specification. Okay, and I'll save my batch. So I've now created a batch. So now I'm going to set about creating some samples on here. So if I go to Add, and I'll say, let's have 6 of these samples, Add, Save Changes. So at the moment, the status of the batch is N. So I could go in and I could add more samples if I want to. I'll add another sample, Save Changes, and I can highlight a sample and I can review what's on that sample. So if I click on Add Methods, I can look at the list of methods. There's not that many on this particular system, so I shall add that one next. So in other words, at this point I'm setting up the batch record. I've created my samples. I'm reviewing the details of the samples. I'm editing them. And I get to a point where I think, right, that's all done. Oops, save my changes. And it's now at the point where the contract review step could be carried out. Now, I'm not going to log out and log in again, but assuming that I'd set that all up as a normal lab user, or even perhaps a receptionist who deals with creating these orders as they come in, somebody comes along, checks it all out. So I've logged back in as admin, see admin up here, I come along, I check it all out, I go, yep, that matches, or yes, this customer has got lots of credit with us, so we're quite happy to proceed with this one. If I'd associated an order with this, you could check the order number details against the batch details. I haven't actually got any orders in this test system, so I can't add one. Same thing with quotes as well. When I'm happy that everything's as it should be, if I click on the status, there is a status of contract review. So if I click on that and save the changes, the fact that I have now done that and the time and date that I reviewed it is now time-stamped into the system, so we know who the reviewer was. Also, if I highlight these samples, I didn't show you this before, I'll have to show you this again. If I highlight the samples, they can now be received. But if I come along as a different user and think, oh, I'm just going to add another sample, so I'll just add another couple of samples here. Add. Save changes. You can see what's happened is the status has gone back to N. In other words, the person has reviewed the batch as it was and set it to contract review, at which point you can receive the samples. Now it's gone back to N. I can show you if I highlight these can't be received, and until they're status P, you can't put any results against them. So in other words, you've set up the batch, it's been reviewed, but then if you make any edits to it, like add methods, add extra samples, the batch status will go back to N and it needs to be reviewed again, at which point then you can receive. So that's it in a nutshell, basically. So quite simple functionality, but it just adds an extra check stage in the batch manager so that you don't just create batches of samples and just press on with them without having somebody just checking them over and saying, yep, this is what was agreed in our contract with the customer, or the correct testing has been put on these samples, or they've ordered up 10 samples and we've only got 8 here, what's happened to the missing 2 samples, or anything like that. So it's short and sweet. I hope it was nice and clear and it made some sense to you. So thank you very much.